how we tell science stories with wonder and discovery, and also to push the frontiers with another storytelling tool that is increasingly common, and that is technology, right? So the native peoples did not have a smartphone. They just had their brilliant words. They didn't need a smartphone. But now we've got it. And how many in the room, I'm just curious, have watched a 360 video where they can look around? Raise your hands high. Okay, great. And here at GW, we're starting to teach that. Taught that in my class this last semester, and two of my students, Nolan Hausler and Emily Robinson. Where are they? Is Nolan here? Nope. You snooze, you lose. We bought 360 cameras, and they went out, and they went to a nearby rooftop. Chris, let's take a look at Don't Kill My Buzz.
Welcome to the rooftop. This isn't just any roof. See those green and blue boxes? What do you think's inside of them? How many do you see? In each box, over 30,000. On this roof, over 500,000 honeybees. See the beekeeper in the white suit? That's Gabby Discafani. Watch as she inspects the hive. These buzzing bees appear to be thriving, but they could die at any moment. Why? It's called colony collapse disorder, and it's killed off 40% of North America's honeybees in the last 10 years. Researchers aren't sure why.
So this 360 video takes you from the roof, now across the street to Founding Farmers Restaurant, where the bees, honey, produced on this rooftop is actually used to try to illustrate in a 360 way, and you get to look around in the kitchen as well, what is at stake here. So where's Emily? Wave. Great job. Thank you very much. Was that fun? It was fun. Was it hard? An interesting learning experience. That's what every professor wants to hear, that they've prompted an interesting learning experience. So what we want to do now is look at some more interesting learning experiences, an incredibly interesting learning experience in the notion of storytelling. Again, around a character, but a different character. Again, evoking emotion, but a different kind of emotion, taking you someplace. This is what I would tell you is the most important single thing about every kind of storytelling. Native storytelling, virtual storytelling, is it takes you someplace. It transports you, your imagination, your intellect, your emotions. Today, we're going to push the frontiers with an immersive virtual reality experience. And I am thrilled to have a team from Stanford University. They have been working on this project for a very long time. They'll tell you about it. They've spent a lot of money, which Stanford is able to do. They'll tell you about that too, to produce a remarkable experience. Tobin Asher, Elise Ogle will join you. I am going to totally turn it over to them now. Do you need time to set up?
You give us
1 minute.
2 minutes.
I will not turn it over to them yet while they set up. How many have done an immersive VR experience in the room? Okay, very few. So this is going to be good because the rest of you are going to go on a trip. Let me tell you a little bit about Tobin and Asher while they and Elise while they set up. So Tobin has a bachelor's in communication from Stanford. His interest is in virtual reality and immersive journalism as a way of making people feel the story more powerfully and bringing them closer to distant topics. He helps facilitate the virtual human interaction lab, which is where they did this work, their research projects. He coordinates logistics and outreach and does software and hardware both. He programs virtual worlds, he edits video, he composes scores for virtual reality experiences, and if I'm not mistaken, he had an internship on The Daily Show. Is that right?
I did.
That's awesome. Okay, so he'll make us laugh maybe. Elise also works at the Human Interaction Lab. She graduated from Stanford with a master's and bachelor's degrees in communication in June of 2015. She does and loves research. Her virtual human interaction lab research focuses on using virtual reality to design immersive educational narratives that will raise awareness about ocean acidification. And that's what you're going to visit today, an ocean that is acidifying. She manages projects and the developers and designs virtual reality simulations and 3D modeling. I should tell you, by the way, if you don't know already, and I don't know if Mitch is here from the museum, but Mitch has helped us with this, and the HTC Vives that you'll see are on loan from the museum. The museum, Google, Apple, and virtually every media company on the planet right now are investing significant money in this. Imagine, Tom Lovejoy, if we can take people virtually to the rainforest and what they would see. Imagine, Chris, if we could take them virtually to a farm or to a country or to a place and they can experience this. So if you're ready, I'm out of here.
All right.
So thank you so much for the introduction. It's really great to be here, and I hope that you guys are excited to see a live VR demo. I know we're certainly nervous to do this. It's not like it hasn't been done before, but as Frank said, I am Elise, and I'm project manager in the Virtual Human Interaction Lab.
And I'm Tobin. I'm the lab manager at VHIL at Stanford. And we're going to talk a little bit today about virtual reality and storytelling, and why virtual reality is a unique and great medium through which to tell stories. To do that, we're going to do a live demo in just a few minutes. And this is really exciting because, and the reason why Elise said we're a little bit nervous to do the live demo is because this is stuff that we've only started recently doing, because it's only within the last year that the technology has really enabled us to bring demos outside of our lab. Our lab at Stanford, the system that we're using to track, very similar to this, costs about $100,000. The system that you see here today costs about $800, so much more affordable and much easier to move around. And that is really essential to have this system with us, because immersive virtual reality requires that we track your movements in the physical space. We want to know where you are so that we can render that in the virtual world onto a head-mounted display. And tracking, rendering, display, these three key terms, something we talk a lot about in VR, are the three most important components to immersing you in a virtual reality. And this is really, really important that we can achieve this thing that we call presence. Presence is the feeling that you are not passively watching something, but actively experiencing it. And experiences make up our lives, or are a big part of our lives. Experiences shape the way we think, shape our behavior. And so if we can prove to you that virtual reality can feel like a real-life experience, well, maybe we can also make you believe that VR can change the way you think, change your behavior. And that's what we study at the lab at Stanford. We study the psychological and behavioral effects of virtual reality, not just how it affects you when you're in the experience, but also once you've left that virtual world, re-entered the real world. How do those experiences stay with you? So Elise is going to take a few minutes to talk about some of our past research, and this experience we'll demo for you today, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the storytelling process.
So we do something a little bit different with our stories. We create them, but we also measure how they impact people. And I feel like that is a very important thing to do. So when we create experiences in our lab, we have a number of different applications that we focus on. We have medical applications. We have empathy applications. So experience what it's like to become someone else, step into the shoes of another person, and see life from their perspective. But what we're going to focus on today is our lab's pro-environmental work. So how can we use a VR experience to change your attitudes about the environment and your behaviors towards the environment? So we created an experience a couple years ago that we refer to as the tree cutting study. So how many people here have cut down a tree in real life? Raise your hand. Good. So for many people, maybe not in this room, when you consume paper, it is essentially, when it's non-recycled paper, the connection to the consequence of your environmental action is that you are cutting down a tree. So we have this experience, we created it, a simulation that we just run over and over again, where you cut down a tree in virtual reality. You hold a controller, much like this, gives you a little bit of haptic feedback. You see a tree in front of you, and you physically cut down the tree. We ran this study with 3 groups of people. The first group got to cut down the tree in virtual reality. The second group watched a video of a person cutting down a tree. And the third group did a traditional perspective taking exercise, which would be reading a narrative and being told to imagine that you're cutting down this tree. We asked people directly after the experience, are you going to change your paper consumption? What do you think they said? Yes, of course you want to say that you're going to be a green person. But we found a way to measure paper consumption after the experience, and there's a statistically significant difference between groups. People in the virtual reality condition that became connected with the consequences of their environmental actions used 20% less paper. So we thought these findings were really promising, and we actually replicated this study, so it's not just one and done. We decided to look at different issues now. So we wanted to teach people about something called ocean acidification. So who here knows what ocean acidification is? Wonderful, or also sad. So for those of you that don't know, ocean acidification is the byproduct of burning fossil fuels. When humans release carbon dioxide, it goes up into the atmosphere, and a lot of that carbon dioxide is absorbed by the ocean, and it reacts with seawater to form carbonic acid, which is making our oceans more acidic. So that's a very general overview. And this is one of the interesting things about having a collaboration between the science and the language and also the storytelling, because you can't just throw a bunch of terms out at someone and expect them to really pick up on the chemistry. So what we decided to do was create a simulation to teach people about this. And they get to become a marine biologist and explore the effects of ocean acidification on a rocky reef ecosystem. So don't expect like Finding Nemo reef right now. It's rocky reef. And what we have here today is the entire experience, but we're only showing a brief portion of it where you're actually on the reef. And this was created, it was a really interdisciplinary collaboration between us and the VR lab. So we do a mixture of the programming and the 3D modeling. And it was also a collaboration with Stanford marine biologists Theo McKelly and Christy Croker, as well as educators in the School of Education. So we created this to teach people. And so we actually have a volunteer who's going to come up, Emily. Come on up, step into our office. So she's going to be putting on the head-mounted display. Does that feel okay? Yep. All right. And she can also see these hand controllers. So I'm going to have you turn to your left 90 degrees and take one step to your right. And you'll notice that we're going to be making sure that she is staying safe in VR. One of the interesting things that we've discovered is that people react to VR experiences differently. You'll notice we're on a stage. It's a little bit dangerous. Sometimes people forget, actually, a lot of times people forget they're in the real world, and they'll take off exploring, and you have to be there to be like, don't do that, you're gonna run into a wall, or like, just step off the stage. But I'm here to keep you safe, so don't worry. Takes a couple seconds to load, but you will be able to see what she's looking at up on the screens. It's not fun just watching someone in a headset. All right, it's ready.
Climate change has begun. It is already hurting our planet. Many of us have seen the toll on cities and coastlines already, but very few people witness the damage below the ocean's surface. Now, what if you had a crystal ball, and that crystal ball showed you exactly what the world's oceans would look like in a future affected by climate change? Walk up and touch the crystal ball to experience it for yourself. People learn best from first-hand experiences. We've used computer graphics to allow you to interact with the reef. Look around. Notice the vibrant colors and different animal species around you. As a marine scientist, your job is to measure the health of this reef by doing a species count. Today, you will focus on sea snails. Look down at your right hand and rotate it until you can see the snail. This is the type of healthy sea snail you'll be looking for today. Look around for the flags in the blue basket. Reach down and touch the flags with your hand to...
All right.
Sorry, we just gotta do a little restart. This is the challenge of doing a live demo.
So now you're going to get to learn twice about it. I'll give a little bit of background too. So we created, you can keep the headset on. We created the simulation with Christy and Fio specifically about this reef off the coast of Italy near the island of Ischia that has these special volcanic vents that release pure carbon dioxide, so no sulfur, no heat. And so they study different areas of this reef to look at the effects of ocean acidification at an accelerated rate. So they can predict what our oceans will look like in the year 2100 or the year 2050. I can grab these.
Thank you.
You see this one?
It's so black for me.
Can you restart Steam? Just have to make sure these. Let me see these.
Yes.
All right.
Turn
Can you
this
see
on.
again?
Yes.
Great.
Round two.
Climate change has begun. It is already hurting our planet. Many of us have seen the toll on cities and coastlines already, but very few people witness the damage below the ocean's surface. Now, what if you had a crystal ball, and that crystal ball showed you exactly what the world's oceans would look like in a future affected by climate change? Walk up and touch the crystal ball to experience it for yourself. People learn best from first-hand experiences. We've used computer graphics to allow you to interact with the reef. Look around. Notice the vibrant colors and different animal species around you. As a marine scientist, your job is to measure the health of this reef by doing a species count. Today, you will focus on sea snails. Look down at your right hand and rotate it until you can see the snail. This is the type of healthy sea snail you'll be looking for today. Look around for the flags in the blue basket. Reach down and touch the flags with your hand to pick one up. Now that you have a flag, find a snail. Reach out with the flag in hand and touch the snail to place the flag beside it. Continue to pick up flags from the pile and place them on the snails surrounding you. Try to be quick. Time is up. We will now move to a more acidic part of the reef. Observe the changes that have occurred as acidity has increased. Reach out and touch one of the streams of bubbles rising from the sea floor. Remember that the vents here are releasing CO2, which is making the water more acidic. You study this part of the reef to predict the future, how human emissions will affect our world's oceans and the species that live within them. Look at your right palm. Notice how acidity has corroded the sea snail's shell. Now take a moment to walk around and look for sea snails in this area. Couldn't find any? That's because there are no living sea snails here. They can't survive in this environment. Ocean acidification will severely impact all shelled species, including oysters, clams, corals, and certain types of plankton. Without these species, the entire food web can collapse.
All right.
I'll take this.
Good job. Thank you, Emily,
Thank you
for
very
doing
much.
that. We're going to come, I think, and hear a little about your experience with that in just a minute, maybe. But before that, I just want to quickly touch on a few points about VR and storytelling and a few things that we've learned through the process of creating this experience. This has been through many iterations. As Elise mentioned, it started as her honors thesis, and then we had a version of this at the Tribeca Film Festival last spring. And then we got pretty good reception from that, and we were invited to present this at the US Senate last September. And in the process of revising this for the Senate presentation, we looked to the things that we learned from our experience at Tribeca, and we learned a lot about storytelling from that experience and having hundreds of people come through it. One of the things that we really had to think about was this balance between what we as the creators want to impart onto you, but also with this idea that VR is all about exploration, just like you would explore the real world, and giving you that freedom to do that. And one of the things that we did when it was at Tribeca was instead of walking around the reef, you were able to actually swim around it. So with those controllers in hand, you would go like this, and that would navigate you around the reef. We had a few issues with that. One, it wasn't actually as intuitive as we thought. We thought people would say, hey, this is underwater, I'll swim. No, they still feel like they're on land a little bit, so swimming like this isn't great. So we moved to walking. Another thing is because it was so fun and engaging the whole time with the swimming and gamification aspects, people weren't listening to the science. And so that's an issue when we're trying to teach people about this complicated issue, ocean acidification. And so we had to do a little bit more separation between when we're teaching people about the science things, the things that we really want them to hear, and when it's a little bit more fun and they can do the snail finding task. Another thing, because people were swimming around, they could actually swim outside the reef. And they went to these parts of the ocean that were sandy, and there was nothing to learn there. And that's what VR is about, right? It's about exploring. And it's hard to limit people in that by saying, oh, don't go over there. Instead, we built things into the environment, like adding those shelves that you saw, those walls of the reef, so people are less likely to try and explore other areas. And so in creating in this new medium, these are a lot of the challenges that we have to think about, and how do we walk this balance between what we, the users, want, the creators want, and what the users want to do in exploring.
And also keeping it scientifically accurate.
Right, which is a really important part and has taken a lot of time to really work with scientists or experts in whatever field that we're doing a VR experience about. I think we'll end the presentation part there, and we'll maybe take some questions.
All right. Well, thank you very, very much. And I want to ask one question of you and then open it up for a couple of minutes of questions if anybody's got it from the floor, because this really is, as we said, pushing the frontier. And it's one of the reasons why we thought it was so important to bring this in, because we know so much that technology has become so much a part of our lives. Technology has changed the way the news media have done business, because most people now are consuming their news via Facebook Friends. That has all sorts of opportunities and hazards to it, and on their mobile devices, which means they're watching on a smaller screen. But with storytelling like this, and Emily, you did this with the 360 video,
Yes.
Who Stole My Buzz, you are giving storytelling power away, right? You don't own the stage the way Robin did when she told her story. You don't own the picture the way I would do when I tell a television piece and I'm saying, now look here, and I write a few words about that. Now look here, and I let you do a soundbite. So how do you, first of all, did you find that a challenge? And Emily, you should talk too a little bit about it in your story. And then how do you account for that in the storytelling?
So there are a number of things that you have to, in our case, we have to program different scenarios into what we create. So we have to direct users' attention when we want them to find the basket of flags. So you notice there's like a circle around it that started flashing. We set fail states, so if the person doesn't look at the basket, we assume that they don't know where it is, so we have that audio repeat.
So you have to get them there. You have to direct them there.
Yeah, and we hold the simulation until they meet our certain requirements. So they have the ability to explore, and luckily they can just run the program again if they really want to see something that they missed. But we can program in certain elements to make sure that we get our point across, but also give them freedom.
Emily, how when you were doing your piece off the roof?
Yeah, in a 360 video, a lot of times it's rethinking how you write your script. So a lot of times in a normal TV package, you have your one focus and that's what people are looking at, but now you're giving the viewer the choice of what they want to look at. So you're going to write your script in a way that guides them where they should be looking. And of course they can see anything they want, but there is that one thing you're probably trying to get them to look at, and the whole atmosphere they can look at in the meantime, and you want to make sure they have enough time to look around at everything going on.
And I think a big part of it is also in choice of what you choose to create in VR. Something we talk a lot about in our lab is deciding what goes good in VR. And there's probably an infinite number of things you can do in VR, but it's finding the ones that work really, really well. And so whenever a PhD student or anyone comes to our lab and says, hey, we want to make a VR experience about X, Jeremy Bailenson, who's the brilliant director and founder of our lab, will always say, write out 20 ideas of things you could do for that, and more often than not, only a few of those things, or if maybe just one of those will actually work well in VR, because you want to think about what's really going to take full advantage of the affordances of this technology. One thing that we talk about, there are 4 main reasons to use VR. If something would be dangerous to do in the real world, if something would be impossible to do in the real world, if something would be counterproductive to do in the real world, like cutting down a tree, or expensive. It would be expensive to fly everybody to Ischia to show them these reefs. And so, not saying there are things outside of those categories that would be good to do in VR, but maybe there's another medium that's better for it, or just have a real world experience.
Did you measure the effect of this VR on people's attitudes or behaviors?
Yes.
What did you find?
So we ran 2 different studies, actually, 2 versions of studies, and then one study was a 3-part study, and that was confusing. What we found is that directly after the experience, so we're comparing across levels of immersion. So people get the VR experience, or people get the same experience like you all did, just watching it on a television screen. We compare across immersion differences, and what we find is that directly after the study, people feel like this issue is important and that they want to do something about it. But after a week, we see that the effects only persist for people in virtual reality. So that was a finding from our first study. Our other studies just measured learning. So people learn in virtual reality, but the content definitely matters, the way that you design the content. And that is really, as Tobin said, an iterative process.
Tobin, last question for you. Why is this storytelling? Why isn't this just a video game with words?
Well, there's a lot of aspects to it, I think, and I think storytelling is a pretty broad term, but there is a narrative, and there is an even more of a narrative when you see the full experience, where you're engaging people. I really liked what was said just a few minutes ago about this idea that storytelling isn't just about facts, but also engaging people, and there's a real emotional human component to virtual reality where you are becoming part of it, and we have some other pieces where you actually become a person, a character in that environment, and so you yourself are going through the story, you're weaving through it, and it's affecting you in a very unique way.
Tobin and Elise are going to be doing a breakout session this afternoon at 2 o'clock over in District House after lunch. And so you'll have an opportunity to go and actually talk to them and hear more from them and ask them some of the how-tos if you're interested in this, or if you want to go to Stanford and they'll teach you directly, but, you know, get cracking. And Emily is around as well, so will you join me in thanking them for this presentation? Really appreciate it. I would direct your attention, the New York Times, the Washington Post, now owned by Jeff Bezos, and other news organizations are doing a lot of experimentation with 360 and VR. You may have, how many of you have got the cardboard viewers that the New York Times sent around, okay? So some of the projects they put out, they did a 360 video after the Paris terror attacks. That was one of the most powerful things I've seen, where you could look around at people who were standing, gathered around at the place with flowers, weeping and praying and singing. And there was no track, there was no narration. You experienced that moment. And it was a very powerful way to take yourself into an event as it was happening. But another form of storytelling and another way that we will be connecting.